In my briefing, I'll have some suggestions for you when you experience issues with your senior NCOs and your first sergeant and how to address those. So, that's it. In the overview here, you can see that near the bottom I've got the time slot allotted for question and answer period. There's only 15 slides to this. I can break through it really fast in 15 minutes. But if you have a question anytime during it, don't hesitate to stop me during the brief. And if I see that we're getting a little too far off track, I'll bring us back on and we'll answer the question towards the end. I didn't bring any business cards with me, but the last slide here has my contact info on it, so I'm going to jot that down. Also in the global, last name Lowden, Lowden. Okay. Who we work for as first sergeants. I have an AFI up here, AFI 36-2113. That's the first sergeant. That's the Bible that we as first sergeants operate to. Within section 1.1, we'll find that the first sergeant works directly for and arrives their authority, or derives their authority, directly from unit commander. And I'll get a little bit deeper into how we support our commanders in the upcoming slide. When it comes to chain of command, we report directly to our commander, and most often that's a lieutenant colonel. Also, when considering the chain of command, the first sergeant, who is either a master sergeant or a senior master sergeant, is often outranked by other NCOs in their duty section. For me, in my duty section, there are 5 chief master sergeants. I don't report to any of those chief master sergeants, but I have a very close working relationship with them. My chain of command is directly to Lieutenant Colonel Baldy, my supervisor. So the other thing I want to cover here is the first sergeant's tour of duty. We do a 3-year tour of duty in a first sergeant's seat, and then towards the end of those 3 years, the end of the second year, I should say, the command chief within the wing will meet with my supervisor, Lieutenant Colonel Baldy, and discuss my performance. It's up to Lieutenant Colonel Baldy to make the decision if he'd like to bring me on or extend me for a second 3-year term. So as a first sergeant, we're going to be doing a 6-year term, hopefully. And then we also work closely with the wing command chief. For me, that's Chief Fortner. He serves as the functional manager for first sergeants. When there's an opening, something I wanted to briefly discuss is, when there's an opening for a first sergeant, the wing command chief, along with 2 existing first sergeants, will interview a pool of people who applied for a position as a first sergeant. The interview team, the command chief and 2 first sergeants, will rack and stack those individuals who interviewed for that position. The command chief will then meet with the commander who has an opening for a first sergeant, and the command chief will present what he believes to be his top 2 picks for the next first sergeant. At that point, the decision is solely up to the unit commander who he or she is going to pick to be that area's next first sergeant. Okay, responsibilities. Here I'm going to have to read directly from our AFI. The first sergeant must ensure the enlisted force understands the commander's policies, goals, and objectives. So how do we do this as a first sergeant? We continuously make ourselves available in the workplace, which for some first sergeants is way easier than for others. My counterpart, Master Sergeant O'Keefe in AMXS, where the crew chief works, he gets to meet with all of his people just like I am with you right now. He does a morning briefing on Saturday, Sunday, gets to meet with all of his people. I, on the other hand, have 18 career fields spread across 5 different buildings. It's extremely difficult for me to meet with all of my people on a regular basis. So how do I handle that? Lieutenant Colonel Baldy, who I work for, I come in on the Friday before guard weekend, every guard weekend, and I knock out every administrative duty that I can, and then put out fires all Saturday, Sunday long during the guard weekends. I also make myself available guard weekend mornings to attend as many section or morning briefings that I can, and then do what I call a walkabout pretty much all day long. If I'm not putting out fires, I'm trying not to start fires, but attending to people's needs. Support agencies. The first shirt must also ensure that support agencies like security forces, civil engineering, medical facilities, services are all responsive to the needs of unit personnel. A really basic example of this is, let's say I've got an individual who on Saturday morning is due urine analysis and a PT test at the same time. As a first shirt, I'm going to jump over to the clinic and say, hey, can you take Airman Snuffy and put him in the front of the urine analysis line so that he can also do the PT test the same morning? It's a part of your position, or our first shirt's position power. Availability to members' needs 24/7. First sergeants are accountable to and respond to the needs of unit members 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So what does this mean? It means that if we have a member who is rushed to the hospital, the first sergeant's going to be the one to keep squadron leadership informed of any status updates. And a really good example of this just happened about 2 months ago. Over in AMXS, we had a female who was driving her motorcycle in during the morning, heading to Saturday morning UTA. She's going around a sharp curve. Somebody pulled out in front of her. She T-boned the car and sustained numerous injuries. She's still in the hospital about several months ago. Okay, so what happened from there? What did the first sergeant do? Sergeant O'Keefe, who's the first sergeant in AMXS, visited the hospital. The very first thing that he did was assure the family that that airman was on her way in for UTA. The medical bills are covered. Don't worry about it. We got it. Do not present your medical insurance card to the hospital. We got it. The other thing that Sergeant O'Keefe did was keep very close tabs with the family. They were absolutely loving him with this. Sergeant O'Keefe was keeping close tabs with the airman's father and getting updates, providing those updates to squadron and group level officers to keep them informed and in loop as to that airman's progress and recovery. So that's just an example of how we respond to unit members' needs 24/7. We're not on orders 365 days a year, but you'll find easily that the first sergeants in any wing throughout the Air Force are geared towards people. Okay. Moving on, advisor to the commander on programs. Again, quoting the AFI, first sergeants must remain vigilant for and use the necessary authority to resolve issues that, if left unchecked, would adversely impact unit readiness. And I like to use examples here. So, going back a couple months ago in my duty section, we had an individual who, let's say the supervisor didn't view that airman as a shining star. Okay. I met with all the individuals involved, the airmen themselves, the supervisor, and got a good feel for what was going on in the shop. And then visited with my supervisor, Lieutenant Colonel Baldy, to give him some feedback on it. And what we decided to do was pull the NCO of that section into the colonel's office and have a little sit down with them and figure out a way forward. You know, you got to give everybody the opportunity to improve. So after that meeting, we then pulled in the airman who was having some issues, pulled that individual in and presented them a way forward. Now, what happens from there? Things are better in that section, but it's my job as a first shirt to keep an eye on the situation and to keep a pulse on it. And then to keep my commander informed of anything he may need to be made aware of. And with that, you can guarantee pretty much every commander is a really busy person. It's my job to keep him updated on the status of that situation and keep him out of trouble. Moving along. First sergeants are first responders for suicidal members. We had a suicide in the 108th over the past year. It didn't occur on base, and nobody was really aware of that individual's needs until it was too late. But that section's first sergeant, after the fact, was proactive in this case, and that first sergeant assured that unit members in that section were made very well aware of the fact that the wing has resources available. If someone needed assistance with coping skills or grief counseling after the fact, because that person definitely had some friends. Family care plan. Commanders are responsible for family care plan, but that program is administered by the first sergeant. This is our baby, right? And we oversee the program in its entirety with input from the unit member. And I'll cover the family care plan briefly here in the next slide. Okay. Again, when it comes to the family care plan, this is first sergeant's baby. The entire program is governed by AFI 36-2908 and is administered by the first sergeant with input from the unit member who is required to have a documented family care plan. And it's important that you hear that part. A member who's required to have a family care plan. Not everybody in the Air Force is required to have a family care plan, at least a documented family care plan. So who is required to have a family care plan? There's 4 driving factors to who needs a documented family care plan. Single parents, a single parent with dependents, dual military couples with dependents, a married service member who has children, but their spouse is not the biological parent of that child. They're required to have a documented family care plan. And then those members who are fully responsible for dependent family members. Who's that? If I had a parent living with me who was, let's say, bedridden or something, if I had a brother or sister who was a special needs person and they rely solely upon me, I need to have a documented family care plan. And a brief example right here. I was doing some annual training this week. The section supervisor comes into my office and says, "Hey, Shirt, got a minute?" "Yeah, sure, come on in." He says, one of his section's people, a guy was dating a woman from another country who was living in the United States illegally. He got married to her 2 weeks ago. So the section supervisor says to me, "Do they need a family care plan?" "Well, I can't answer that question until you answer 4 questions for me." And those 4 questions are, it's obviously not a single parent, so that one's out. Are they a dual military couple? Doubt it. Did they have any kids? Neither one of them had any kids, so that one's out. Okay, did they have anybody living with them that is special needs or whatever that the military member is the sole provider for? No, that's out. Okay, they don't need a family care plan, or that member doesn't need a family care plan. Okay. Getting back to the family care plan here. Wasn't advancing there. How's the program validated? The first shirt goes into the documented family care plan. There's a form in there called a 357. It's got the short and long-term caregivers for the military member. Okay, so what I'm going to do as a first shirt is there's an address, there's a phone number there for these short-term, long-term care providers. I'm going to call those people and say, "Hey, are you actually willing to do what the member said here?" It's my way of, I have to validate those people. Also, Force Support Squadron is going to come over and they're going to sample the family care plans that I have for my people in my section. And the things that they're looking for is that the members come in by on an annual basis to review the data and sign off that, yes, this is still a current and valid family care plan. Okay. This slide here isn't meant to have you pitting your chiefs against your first sergeants or anything. It's basically a list of, or a guide for you to consider when you're unsure of which leadership position to discuss these topics with. So that said, see your section's chief or senior NCO when you have a member who has anything related to that left column there. Clinic issues. If there's a member who is overdue shots or they're due shots, PHA, occupational health or dental screening, those are all things that you'd want to see the section NCO or the section chief about. Fitness issues, members due for testing or retesting, security clearance renewals, finance submissions for BAH, recertification, travel pay, submitting orders, that kind of thing. Equipment and facilities, and what I wanted to cover there was there's different accounts, spending accounts, fly accounts, non-fly accounts, tools, equipping the personnel with PPE and uniforms, Buildings and grounds, those are all things that you wouldn't see a first sergeant for. You'd see the section supervisor or section chief on those. Manpower forecasting, which is future goals, promotion eligibility, training. Again, those are all things on the left side you'd see a chief or senior NCO in the duty section about. Then we have your section first sergeant on the right side of the slide. The first sergeant is the unit focal point for morale, welfare, reprimand, and quality of life in the organization. In carrying out their duties, the first sergeant is always trying to keep one simple philosophy in mind. Mission first, people always. Get the mission done, but don't forget about your people. And the way I like to discuss that or bring it up is beds, beans, and bullets. If we're going on an exercise someplace, whole unit's going someplace, I'd want to be one of the advance parties, go there, make sure, yeah, we have enough beds for the people that are coming, make sure we got enough linen for the people that are coming, and, oh, is there somebody that's going to be issuing that out? And if, let's say, there's a plane that breaks back at home station, they're going to be arriving several hours late, is there still some, going to be somebody there after hours to issue that stuff out? So that's the beds portion. Beans, make sure that, hey, if that plane is arriving late, is there going to be food for the people that are arriving? It's all about looking out for the people. And bullets is just to make sure that the facilities that are there are going to support the mission that we're there to do. Okay, you also want to see the first sergeant if you have concerns for repeat fitness failures. The commander will have the member sign for a repeat failure here, a letter of counseling or a letter of reprimand with the first sergeant present in that office. You want to see your first sergeant about issues with law enforcement on a member. Examples are tickets, detained personnel, news of domestic violence. The first sergeant is going to be the one who receives initial notification involving law infractions. Often the command post is going to be the one to receive initial notification, but the command post is going to have contact info for all the first certs in the wing. Government travel card abuse. The shirt will work with the commander, the first line supervisor, and support agencies on solution or resolution. And something to bring up there is, there's different things out there. Why did the member use government travel card when they weren't supposed to? Did they do it to go gamble down Atlantic City, or did the baby need diapers and they were totally broke? There's different things out there. Air Force Aid Society. There's different grants out there that we have knowledge of that we can work with to present to the member. Change of command. The first shirt will aid in the orchestration of that event. Suicidal member. The first sergeant is a first responder, as is chaplain, the director of psychological health, which in the 108th is Andrea Lopresti, and the unit commander. Oh.
Can you just click back onto the slide presentation up top?
I can go on without.
Yeah, please. Oh, there you go.
Okay, so with all that said on the previous slide, what if you're having issues with responsiveness from your senior NCOs or your first sergeant? As with everything else in life, communication is key to success. So how do you assure success? First of all, verify the message that you're communicating is, without a doubt, fully understood. That may mean asking someone at the end of a conversation and a tasking, so how are you going to handle this? Putting the emphasis of a do out on the NCO. You also may want to follow up with an email requesting an update on the tasking. And that could be something as simple as stating in the email, thanks for taking the time to discuss XYZ project with me. as a follow-up, you will be providing me with whatever the outcome was supposed to be and by whatever date. You should also convey in your message some sort of trust, like have confidence in your ability to do this. And then what I consider trust but verify, you might want to review some sort of objective evidence of the tasking's completion. In my civilian career, what I do is I work for the Department of Defense, traveling around different companies, inspecting items that are being manufactured for the sustainment of current weapon systems or the development of future weapon systems. And as part of my job there, I need to verify that certain tasks were completed. And the way that I do that is basically just using 2 words: show me. Okay? And those 2 words can be presented or phrased in a number of different ways. You might want to state something along the lines of, so I can be better prepared to brief my supervisor, can you explain how you achieve these results? It gives you a better background on what you were asking for. You might also want to bring up the fact that you might be attending an Air National Guard conference someplace, and what comes up at these symposiums and conferences is a bunch of different problems and brainstorming of different solutions. So what you can state to the individual, your NCO, is that so I have a better understanding and I can brief people, can you explain this system and its your outcome to me so I can better present it to other individuals. Kudos. I know I don't have to tell you this, but you should always try to give credit where credit is due. And expanding on this, you always, always, always want to praise in public and punish in private. Any good manager knows you praise in front of as many people as you can, and then, Airman Snuffy, can I see you in my office for a second? Close the door, punish in private. But what if just the opposite of kudos? What if you're having problems with people? If you can't resolve an issue with a chief or a senior NCO, please try to see your first sergeant on it. They'll light a fire underneath the person's bed or whatever. And if you can't resolve an issue with your first sergeant, you're going to wind up having to see your supervisor or commander on the issue, responsiveness issues. And that, more often than not, will be followed up with bringing that NCO into the commander's office and figuring out a way forward. You'll know best, though, the relationship that you have with your commander and when to engage them on an issue. Okay, there's a lot going on here. The main takeaway here is that for first sergeants, our guard weekends are pre-populated with a lot of things to do. For me personally, what I get the most out of during my guard weekend is attending the section briefings and doing my, what I call walkabouts. I also get a lot out of the First Sergeant's Council meeting where I interact with my peers. And that last item there, I am constantly putting out fires throughout the guard weekend. Okay, so in the 20 minutes or so that I had, these are the topics that I covered. I placed them back up here, hopefully that it might have tickled your brain a little bit for any questions that you may have. That said, any questions?
Chief. Whoa. Wow. Chief Morton, quick question for you, Sergeant Lowden. What role does the first sergeant play with members not showing up for UTA weekends and also with our non-participants?
I didn't hear the second part there.
What role do you as a first sergeant play with members not showing up for UTA weekend and then further become a non-participant?
Becoming a non-participant, okay. So first I'm going to meet with the section supervisor to see why they're out. Are they out for medical reasons, right? Or is it just AWOL, right? If they're out, either one, I'm going to brief my commander on that and then see if, one, did they have an approved absence? If they had an approved absence, they scheduled in advance a vacation or they had a family wedding or something to go to, That's my interaction right there. Did I answer your question, or is there another part to it there that?
No, that's good. One other question.
It's also keeping the commander informed, because he's got to be in the know, in the loop on that response that I gave. The question that I posed to the section supervisor, the commander's got to be in that loop.
All right. Last question. We talked about fitness failures and what have you. Do you also interact with the chiefs within that maintenance group to come to a solution for those fitness failures?
So here's what I do, and I can give a prime example of this. There's one individual, I'm not going to mention a shop, I'm not going to mention a name, but one individual I've been working with specifically, I didn't even go to the chiefs. Somebody that I've known for quite a few years in the unit was bombing their push-ups. And the way I approached him with it was, I went into his shop and I said, heard you have problems, you failed this section. Can you do 5 push-ups? I know the requirement's like 50 to max it out, but can you do 5? He's like, yeah, I can do 5, but I can't do 50. All right, well, can you do 5 with me right now? Just 5. He did. He got to 5, and he's like, all right, I did 5. Well, a lot of it's a mind game, If you can do 5, the way I do push-ups, I can do 50 of them right now, and no problem. Do 5 in your head, and then try to do 5 more in your head. And if you can do that, try to do 5 more in your head. All of a sudden, when you get to 25, you're only halfway there. And the way I learned this was, no, you're not gonna go there. I've got a friend who's in the CIA, and he does a lot of mind game stuff in his position. But the way it was explained to me was, try to break it down into the littlest possible pieces, Do 5, 5, 5. And that's the way I learned it, was all of a sudden, you're up to 50, and that's like, now, okay, well, heck, let's do 65. But what I do is I try to go out to the people who failed directly as a first shirt and work with them, see what they failed, That's my approach. Anything else? Joel Blake, another first shirt.
Master Sergeant Blake, 108C. Just to expound on the first thing with non-part or someone's missing drill. Most commanders have their own policy on missing drills. My commander, Lieutenant Colonel Lavello, pretty much gives you an excuse drill for the year. Pretty much on him. Okay, you got that, and then we go from there. Kind of like a case-by-case kind of thing, because like Sergeant Lowden said, there are situations that come up you can't predict, but then you have to kind of go through the weeds and figure out what's going on. So this person's not going to get counted out, and then we're going to start processing them out because they might have been able to avoid something like that. But we give one excusal, and then we go from there. And if I think something might be going on a little extra, sometimes I just reach out and make sure everything's okay, and go from that part. Non-part kind of explains itself. 9 periods, and the music starts.
That's all I have. But following up here, please don't hesitate to drop by your first sergeant's office for a chat. Their office in the 108th should be fairly easy to find. I made up signs for all of their offices that have bold print on them that they hung outside their office that says, "Hey, shirt, got a minute?"